Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is going to be about the word woke, because it seems to me in our little circle around here, there's been a debate as to whether or not we should or should not use the word, and really what it means. Now, I already have a video on the meaning of woke, and there will be a link for you guys to click on that so you can see what it actually means, and why in that video, if I remember correctly, I can't remember every video I ever made, why we shouldn't really use it, at least not in the way that most boomer right-wingers will use it. This all came about because conservative magazine The Mallard decided that they will no longer print that word in their publication. That's fine, they don't have to print any word, really. It's their publication, they can do whatever they want, and they had their own reasons for it. First and foremost, it is the meaning of the term. It doesn't mean what a lot of these boomers think it means. It doesn't just mean weird, cringe, left-wing stuff. That's not what the word means. It means to awake oneself from their slumber and to see the world as it actually is, to see all the injustices that they perceive exist in the world. It's essentially their red pill term. But they also believe that to use this word is to fight within their framework, and that we should try to not fight on their terms, fight on our own terms, and use our own language, or to use language properly, which is ironic, which I'll get into just a little while later, and not to make the same mistakes we've made for the past several decades. That is pretty much my argument as to why we shouldn't use the word, and also they quite rightly point out, as they quote William Yarwood, who is a contributor to the magazine, just call them commies. That's exactly what I've been advocating for ages. Just call them commies. Make it a dirty word. Make them dirty to normal people, like they used to be during the Cold War. And then we have the other side, who say that, actually, no, it's a perfectly normal word, and in fact, if you think about it, we have appropriated that term. It has now changed its meaning. It just means left-wing identity politics bullshit, which the normal person apparently knows when they hear that word. Just like how Murray Rothbard took the term libertarian from communists and anarcho-communists, so conservatives have taken woke from the cultural Marxists. This, they believe, doesn't actually fight on the terms of the left, and in fact, it's the opposite. It's using their own tactics, their own words, their language against them, and it seems to be working, because if you actually notice, a lot of black Twitter leftists, a lot of leftists in general, don't use that term anymore. They don't say, oh, I became woke to this and that and the other anymore. They're kind of just using normal language because it's kind of become a ruined word for them. It's become cringe, it's become uncool to use it, which I think is great because they failed to do the same thing to blue pill, red pill, black pill, white pill, although they use some of those other terms anyway. That's something that you can say is a dub. Now, you all know my opinion. I don't think we should use that word at all, and that's not because I think we're necessarily arguing within their framework and we're using their terms. It's not necessarily that. These mainstream right-wingers have got it all wrong because they don't understand what they're fighting against, they don't understand what terms they're using, and it just muddies the waters. It's just not right, and it's a euphemism. I hate euphemisms. Like George Carlin, I don't like them because they hide the true meaning of words and things. We're using a euphemism to describe something that is real, and it allows these people who are called commies to hide in plain sight. If we just call them wokeists, then that hides to me their true colours, because they're not wokeists, they're communists. Communists that don't rely on class for their philosophy, but on gender, race, sexuality, etc, etc. And I think the Mallard made a really good point, which I think I'll quote. It is useless to say, look, I agree with what they stand for, I just don't like how they're going about it. Then, your disagreement is technical, it is not fundamental. So really, you're just the ones putting the brakes on their movement. They will come for you eventually, so you might as well recognise that now. Calling something woke is a lazy caricature that lets what passes for the right-wing commentariat to get away with murder. The liberals of yesteryear are allowed to displace conservative voices in media, politics and culture. They pretend, in their sarcastic overtones, that leftists are weak and hypersensitive, when in reality, they want to put children on hormone blockers, let men into women's changing rooms, open our borders to people who hate us, and teach the next generation that they have nothing to gain from the civilization that birthed them. I think that pretty much sums up exactly what I think, although there is an ironic twist to this story, which I'll get into near the end. We're essentially not fighting them head on when we use that term. It's laziness. It's just become a buzzword that doesn't mean anything anymore because, as they quite rightly point out, some people on the right are using it to describe anything they don't like. Now, I don't think that most of them are doing that. I think most of them just use it because they don't understand what they're fighting against. They just use that term because they don't know any better. They've just seen all this for the first time since 2016, and that's the word that they've seen prop up loads and loads of times, and just assume that's what the ideology is. That's what it's called, when it's not. And you can see this as well. They do use the term woke to differentiate from other left-wing ideologies that are just as destructive, as if, oh no, these people are the problem, i.e. the intersectionals, but these people over here, the TERFs, for example, they're just fine, even though they're just as bad and in fact influence the other side. I will talk about the irony of all of this from the Mallard's point of view. I agree with them. I disagree with people like Haryan Glaeddyv who did the response to the Mallard, which I'll put down below in the description for you to watch and get a different take on this situation. I think they shot themselves in the foot, which I think he pointed out in his video, by using the term liberal in the American sense of the term. Now, for those of you who may not be aware of American culture and how they use the English language, which is, of course, terrible. They can't speak English properly, as we all know, nor can they spell it properly. They use the term liberal to describe left-wing. They use liberal to describe socialist. And this is the fault of primarily, really, their conservative movement. Left-wingers in America, socialists in particular, co-opted the word liberal, and this was something that was seen even by F.A. Hayek in the 1930s and 40s. They used that term to look more agreeable, to sell themselves better to the average American who, of course, didn't like socialism. If you called yourself a socialist, you look dirty and horrible. It's only really in recent decades where people like Bernie Sanders can call themselves a social democrat and get away with it. The term, much like what Rothbard did with libertarian, was co-opted, it was taken over and used to sell themselves better to the average Joe, and it worked. And somehow, because they must have been stupid, the American conservatives played along with it. I don't know what went into their heads, but for some reason they decided to run with that as well and say, yeah, they're liberals, they're terrible, we're conservatives, we're different, we're reactionaries, we're paleocons. When the truth of the matter is, they are the liberals. What we now call classical liberalism was just liberalism for hundreds of years. They are the true liberals. They are the ones that believe in free markets, in the freedom of the individual, the right to pursuit of happiness, etc, etc. You know what classical liberalism is, guys. I don't need to tell you what it is. You all know what it is and what it stands for. And the Mallard should know that that's what liberalism means. That's what liberalism always was. Now, yes, of course, there's the French version of what liberalism is, which became socialist and became communist and fascist, etc, etc. But we're talking about the English version. And even the French had people who were liberals that were closer to the English and Scottish traditions than they were to their own countries. Right, they're using this word in the exact same way that these idiots in mainstream conservative circles use the term woke. They're using liberal to describe left-wing socialists and communists, and they're playing into the same trap that the American left pulled on the American right all those years ago. And now it's happening in Britain. And they're not alone. I remember in London somebody was using that term in the American way. When I pointed out to him that you're using it wrong, he immediately recognised that yes, he was wrong. And he shouldn't do that. You guys have fallen into cultural colonialism. You're becoming more American. Practice what you preach and use liberalism in the proper traditional way, not in the American way. Now, to conclude, you shouldn't really use the term woke in the way that these people use it, what the Mallard are complaining about, because it's just flat out wrong. It's become a euphemism. Call them commies. You can use woke in the traditional meaning of the term. That's fine, really. In the end, it's just a slang term. I don't really believe that using that term in that way even is fighting on their own terms. It's just a word at the end of the day. I think playing to identity politics and trying to show how much of a true POC they are, like what Priti Patel does in Parliament a lot of the time when Labour accuses her of being essentially an Uncle Tom, is actually playing on their terms. By rejecting that notion, by rejecting that paradigm, you don't play to their terms. That's it, essentially, guys. So until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.